Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this special anniversary edition of Time with PIAC here on Facebook. Today, we are excited to engage you on this important conversation of 14 years of PIAC, looking back, looking ahead. For us at PIAC, since our establishment in September 2011, we have been working to fulfill our threefold mandate, and then we'll get into the details of that shortly. But this is supposed to be a very interactive conversation as we reflect on our 14-year journey, our achievements, our challenges, and what lies ahead of us. We know that PIAC has been at the forefront of promoting transparency and accountability since its establishment in 2011. This session is not just about reflecting on the milestones, but it's also for us to look ahead and see what the future lies ahead for us at PIAC. But before we get into the conversation, I would want us to just take a quick look at this video that kind of reflects or tells us how far we have come or events leading to the establishment of PIAC. It will also provide the context for this conversation. So let's just take a look at that video.
Got support from development partners to organize a civil society preparatory meeting where ordinary citizens, organized and unorganized, determined that they want to be part of the governance arrangements for the petroleum sector. And so I carried this over to the Oil for Development Conference when I had the opportunity to chair the governance session. And from then on, there was a series of engagements, consultations that eventually led to a framework that provided for citizens' involvement in the management of and use of petroleum revenues.
The Revenue Management Act was now done and PIAC was put into it. When it now got to Parliament, parliamentarians at the time felt that it was a duplication of parliamentary work, and that it was up to Parliament to supervise how these funds should be spent. And so they took quite a lot of the clauses out of the Revenue Management Act that they felt were duplication of their work. And one of them was PIAC. So some of us went to Parliament, myself, Honorable Amin. We were then asked to go and defend it. So the team met, we outlined everything, and we went into Parliament, and it was a heated discussion, very heated discussion with the Mines and Energy Committee. But luckily, in the end, they saw what we were talking and the arguments we were putting forward, and then decided to reinstate nearly all the clauses that were taken out. And that was the beginning of real putting PIAC together.
So joining me in studio is Mr. Ishmael Ajikumpini. He's the Executive Director of the Kumasi Institute of Technology, Energy and Environment, KITE. And I also have Isaac Jamna Esquire, and he's the coordinator at the PIAC Secretariat. So hello, gentlemen. Good afternoon, and welcome to this edition of Time with PIAC.
Good afternoon.
I believe you're doing well.
Great. Yes, very well.
So following up from the video that we just watched, that kind of gave us a background to what exactly led to the establishment of PIAC, I would want us to start off our conversation by, Mr. Jekumi, I'll start with you. Tell us what PIAC is and what exactly the committee was all about when it was established in 2011.
So thank you, Jessica. Basically, PIAC is a citizen-led group. It's a committee that civil society and all stakeholders forced for its inclusion in the act. As we heard from the video, there was some resistance at the beginning, but it's a 13-member group that basically is made up of non-state actors. So you have the traditional rulers, you have the religious groups, you have the Institute of Chartered Accountants, you have the Bar Association, you have all relevant stakeholders coming together to form this committee. It's a creature of the act of the law that we all hoped and expected that will provide some guardrails and will provide some platform for us to ensure that we don't misuse our oil revenue, making sure that the revenues are properly tracked, and then they are also, we track how the monies are actually spent. So that's PIAC, and right from the beginning in 2011, when I also happened to be a pioneering member of the PIAC. So it's amazing how time flies and how you look back and wondered how we didn't even envisage what we are seeing today. So we've traveled a long way, but basically it's a body that was created to make sure that we avoid what we all call the resource curse, and that's precisely what PIAC has been seeking to do, I believe, since it was established.
Okay, so let's just stay a bit in 2011. So at inception, were there any expectations from people, especially when PIAC was inaugurated?
We were quite bullish. In fact, we honestly thought that the committee has enough power to help us avoid some of the discretionary spending that we see. So at the time, we had huge expectations. We really thought that once we've managed to find ourselves into the law, into the acts, we thought we had enough muscles to be able to ensure that nothing untoward happened. We didn't quite realize that it was going to be a bit more difficult than we had envisioned, but we really were determined. I think it was a collective determination by all Ghanaians, and including even those who initially opposed and objected to the creation of the PIAC, that it couldn't be business as usual, and that something slightly different ought to be done as far as newfound oil resources were concerned. So we were quite expectant, but it didn't take us too long to realize that it wasn't as we thought, but I'm sure we'll get to that. But we all thought that with what had happened to the our gold resources, and how other countries have learned, the literature on the resource curse is enormous, and with that benefit of what has happened to our neighboring country, Nigeria especially, we thought that this shouldn't be happening to Ghana. So we were quite confident. We were quite confident that we're going to see the oil revenues actually translating into some very concrete developments that we can all be proud of. As to whether we've managed to achieve that, I'm sure in the course of the conversation we'll be able to do that. But everybody associated with the creation of the PIAC, especially with also another provision in the Act, the ABFA, Annual Budgetary Funding Amount, we thought those two mechanisms were quite on point. And we're going to get us the desired outcome from the petroleum revenues that we're going to receive.
So thank you very much, Mr. Ejikun. I would like to bring in Isaac Drumna. He's a pioneering staff because he was at the Secretariat.
But we employed him.
Oh, okay.
I sat on that interview panel.
Exactly.
Oh, okay. That's great to hear. So, but I would like to hear from his perspective. I mean, Mr. Ejikun has spoken about the membership perspective. So from a Secretariat's perspective, 2011, how was the picture like from 2011?
Well, the very bullish expectation he spoke about is hardly reflected in the Secretariat that PIAC had at the time I joined PIAC, 2012, December. I think I met Betty, a national service person, and there was no office. I mean, in the sense of the word. We had a place we would go to when we said to our family that we're going to work, but certainly it didn't, you could hardly call it an office. The conference room for then Revenue Watch Institute, now Natural Resource Governance Institute. One-man secretariat, nothing in place for you to really call it an office. For me, at the beginning, PIAC didn't have a secretariat. It had a one-person staff that supported its work. I'm sure as the conversation unfolds, we'll delve deeper into the evolution. But as he said, the expectation was high that PIAC would play a critical role to ensure transparent, accountable, prudent usage of the revenues. It was the new kid on the block. People were not sure what status it had. Was it an NGO, a CSO? Was it a creature of statute? I remember faintly, PIAC was to publish a report, and I think it had found something untoward that one of the state institutions was said to have done. And when the CEO heard that this was contained in the report, he took steps to take PIAC to court to seek to stop PIAC from publishing the report. And then I'm sure that in the process he heard that PIAC was a creature of statute and he stopped. So these were the beginnings, but it's nice to see what 14 years has brought PIAC, the developments that we can now talk about. So that was the beginning, actually.
Yeah, just to add a bit to what I said, when we were inaugurated by the Minister of Finance, then after the meeting, the question was, what next? Because basically we didn't know where we were going. We didn't have a secretariat, and I think PIAC owes a lot to what Revenue Watch did at the time, and also the support that PIAC got from GIZ and all those bilateral and multilateral organizations. Just basically the expectation was huge, and here we were faced with the realities where we didn't have a secretariat and we didn't have a place that we could call our very own. So yeah, it was quite a humbling beginning, but everything that has a beginning and has a challenging beginning, those situations exist to allow you to appreciate whatever progress you make along the line. It's never easy starting.
Okay, so let me just stay a bit with you, Mr. Jakumini. After your inauguration, I mean, you stated clearly that you asked, what next?
Yeah.
So what did the committee do after inauguration?
Well, so it was like, and let me backtrack a bit and also add to the fact that all of us were very determined. I was there as a civil society rep, and you can imagine the energy levels at the time. We wouldn't allow this thing to happen. So we had our first meeting. We had it in the Minister of Finance's, I think, reception.
Oh, okay.
Yes, just to agree on who will be our chairperson. And then we said, okay, so Revenue Watch, I think then Mr. Emmanuel Kuyole was with us at the inauguration, and they assured us that we could start operating from their secretary, their conference room. So we then immediately constituted our committees. I think we had our first meeting, and then we started working. I mean, basically saying that let's ourselves make sure that we are all on the same page as committee members. We needed to understand what our task was, and then we started devising strategies as to how we're going to execute our tasks. We didn't have the strategic plan that you people had. It's a booga way of doing things, but it was clear in our mind that regardless of the challenge, we were going to do what we thought or we still believe Ghanaians wanted us to do. So we didn't allow it to bother us at all. And I mean, the fact that we were all prepared to work even without allowances for a good number of months.
Yeah, for 2 years.
For 2 years before we're given any allowance. We were traveling to meetings with our own resources, but we were so determined not to allow this creature to die. I mean, we used to say that it was set up, and everything around it meant that it was supposed to be still born, because they inaugurated us. They brought all the people there. They took photographs and they say, "Okay, you wanted it. We've given it to you. Go and make sure that it works."
I mean, it's good to hear that the pioneering committee was determined not to let this vision die. And I mean, looking back 14 years from then, I mean, I'm sure you'd be very proud of yourself sitting here talking about 14 years.
Especially the day I went to the PIAC office. I mean, the current office. I mean, there's been history about PIAC being evicted from places where we thought were offices and all of that. But the day PIAC finally got to its promised land, where they had its own office space, the day I went there, I was so very proud. Because then you realize what determination and resilience could do in every endeavor. But clearly, it wasn't easy. I mean, here you were. Everybody says that there's this new kid on the block that is going to ensure. The word ensure was a big task, onerous one to say that you are going to ensure. So we didn't want to allow anything, and I'm so grateful for our chair at the time, Major Blokwako, who thankfully had been in the system before. So, I mean, having worked with the Cocoa Board as the CEO and all of that, at the time, I think he happened to know a few people even in the Ministry of Finance that he could get them to start. But look, this was a scenario. You've been asked to police some revenue, some monies that somebody has interest in how it's spent, and you expect that same person to equip you, okay, arm you in such a way that give you the AK-47 that when they need you can shoot and kill. So there was very little incentive on the part of the government to say that the PIAC, let PIAC be very, very functional. That incentive motivation didn't exist. So it was up to us to make sure that regardless of the challenges, we will ride the storm. And that's where the independent funding from this bilateral and every little support was appreciated. I mean, our first report, I believe, was sponsored by GIZ. When we got some consultants to do the first report. Incidentally, two of those consultants ended up being ministers of state, Dr. Amin Adam and Dr. Peter Mewu. Those were the first two consultants who worked on the 2011 annual report and all of that. So, yeah.
So if you're just joining us, this is Time with PIAC, and today we are having a conversation on 14 years of PIAC. We are looking back, after which we would look ahead. And my guests are Mr. Ishmael Ejikumhin. He's the Executive Director for KITE, and I also have Isaac Jamna Esquire, the coordinator of PIAC. So, Mr. Jamna, I'll come to you now. What would you say have been some of PIAC's achievements over the last 14 years?
All right. Yes, guy, I think there are a lot. In the first place, citizens can now look forward to some accounting relating to upstream petroleum revenue. This is not the case with mining revenue, where you would be told the number of barrels produced, you would be told the average price at which liftings were done, the total revenue, there's various revenue streams, and then the allocations based on the provisions in the Act, how much was spent in the budget, government's projects and programs that receive petroleum revenue funding. So at least citizens get to see something about petroleum revenue as far as it relates to their state, which is not the case with mining revenue or any other extracted revenue. But more specifically, we can speak about PIAC's influence on government policy. I think earlier we were having this discussion. A number of recommendations in PIAC's reports that have been implemented. As early as 2011, 2012, PIAC began speaking about the need for regulations for the Petroleum Revenue Management Act. It took 8 years. It was in 2019 that the LI 2381 was passed by Ghana's parliament and it came into force. But eventually it did come. So then it means that the recommendation PIAC made as far back as 2011, 2012 ended up seeing the light of day. So its work was not in vain. Then when PIAC's work started, the petroleum revenues, according to the PRMA, are all required to be paid into the Petroleum Holding Fund first before disbursements can be made. Early on, you had the situation where some international oil companies would pay the revenues into the accounts of the Ghana Revenue Authority. And because that was not according to law, it made it difficult for PIAC to fully account for how much had come in and how much government would then allocate. PIAC raised these breaches of the Act over a long period of time, and thankfully, we do not see these breaches occurring. In 2015, the PRMA was amended, and in 2025, it's just been amended. Both amendments relied heavily on the work PIAC had done, some of the challenges PIAC had unearthed, and some of the recommendations PIAC had made relating to the benchmark revenue determination, relating to allocations to the Ghana Petroleum Funds, relating to some petty errors in the PRMA. For example, even though the members are 13, the earlier act mentioned the number 11. So clearly there was an error. These all were brought up by PIAC's work and they were corrected. So, I mean, when we are here to talk about the impact of PIAC's work, I'm sure we can spend the next 2-3 hours talking about them. As I speak about this, I'm sure that Mr. Ejekumhene would have a lot to say, having worked on the other side. I worked as secretariat staff, and he as a committee member would also be able to bring you a perspective that I may not be able to bring as a secretariat staff.
So in bringing his perspective, I would want him to touch on how PIAC's work has impacted transparency and accountability, as was stated in your mandate at the time of inception.
So, I mean, the mere fact that the government of the day, and I'm not talking about the current government, but every government of the day recognizes that they couldn't just do anything and get away with it as far as petroleum revenue is concerned, I thought it's no mean an achievement. The fact that some of the actors, players, state-owned entities were so worried about what PIAC would say, the GMPCs, the Ghana gases, the
Petroleum
commissions wouldn't. I mean, one of the things that I found very amazing was still is the speed with which some very, very sensitive information, otherwise sometimes commercial information, would be released to PIAC. I mean, I happened to be the chairman of the technical committee, and also when I existed, I consulted for PIAC a few times, helping write the report. And sometimes it's interesting when you receive information on things like payments that have been paid. I mean, especially on the gas side, where strictly commercial information, but Ghana Gas is compelled to release those information. For me, that recognition, the fact that somebody feels that there is a state body that can write to you, and if they delay even in providing the information, they are apologizing, which is quite unusual. This was before the right to information and all of those things happened. So for me, that's very critical. But the mere fact that in terms of transparency and accountability, the fact that we are able to know for a fact, I mean, we have concerns in terms of the source of data, because when the data is coming from the same people that you are supposed to be auditing and you don't have any independent way of verifying. But you want to trust that when you have state entities and you have also the private sector entities, which are the IOCs, who are also with different sort of different interests, when you have all of them reporting, because what we were doing was to make sure that we triangulate and make sure that the information that we're getting from GMPC is consistent with what we're getting from Ghana Gas. So for me, it has helped us in knowing how much we've received. Now you can, at the click of a button, know that we've received X amount of money in petroleum revenue. We can somehow also explain how the money has been spent, okay? Whether or not we use the money the right way is another question too. But at least PIAC is able to tell Ghanaians that we receive X amount of money, and this amount of money has been spent on A, B, C, D. We probably can't account for Y amount of money, and we are asking them, it's a recommendation that we want to address. So transparency and accountability, I believe, has been deeply enhanced. And the fact that some of the things that we do in the petroleum sector also impacted on what is even happening in the mining sector in terms of as far as transparency and accountability is concerned. I think those are the critical things that I believe PIAC has been able to achieve over the period. Without PIAC, we probably wouldn't have known for a fact, and we couldn't have vouched for some of the things that government is going to tell us in terms of the reports that we get as far as the petroleum revenues are concerned.
So I'll come back for us to talk about the challenges, but before that, we'd like to take this quick video where the first chair of PIAC, Major Ablokwaku retired, talks about some of the challenges of PIAC at inception. So let's take a look at the video.
Revenue Watch and some other NGOs, international NGOs like GIZ, they came together, saw the need to keep the committee going, because as at that time, no provision had been made for our funding, no provision had been made for offices, secretariat, nothing. We were just there.
You were just there. In 2011, you were just there. Was that the case? So you were just there. What were you doing?
We were just there, like I said, when we were finally inaugurated. We didn't know what next. So we were just there. But we very quickly decided, I mean, like I said, at the inauguration, some of the stakeholders who had fought for the PIAC to be established were there. So right after the meeting, we got to know that we could use Revenue Watch's conference room. And we then, at the time, they were basically relying on even their own staff. So there were people that Revenue Watch had seconded to work with us until we got a national service person in the person of Betty. And then finally we decided that there needed to be a coordinator. And then lawyer Jamina had to be brought on board. So we were basically there, but without a regulation and without any precedent, it wasn't clear where to start from. It wasn't clear how our annual reports were even supposed to look like. What is supposed to go into those annual reports. So we would say that even the first attempt was try and error, but we managed to come up with some terms of reference for the consultants who developed the report. Basically, if it's transparency and accountability, then we need to capture what came in and also how the money was spent. But it was interesting that it took us I think it took us a number of years, at least a couple of years before we started having detailed breakdown on the expenditure side. Yeah. Because that kind of information was always coming from the Ministry of Finance, and they are almost always late because their budget cycle and their reporting cycle was slightly different from, PIAC is supposed to do a semi-annual report in March.
No, September.
In September, and the annual report should come out by March.
Yes.
If you look at the government cycle, business cycle, it's slightly, those are the times that they are also doing their own reconciliations and be able to do that. So it was tough right from the beginning. But I think the key thing was, we didn't have the resources. If you have money, you can recruit people. We didn't even have the money to be able to do that. The committee members were not getting any allowances, and there was always a challenge. But we were just there. But we knew we had a job to do, and we knew that we couldn't let Ghanaians down. So that was the motivation, and that was like I said, we had a team, a group of people who were super committed. Yeah. We had the people who were people we could have sacked. We could have just sat down and say, but they haven't given us the money. Why do we have to even worry? We don't owe anybody any explanation. But we pushed, and thanks to the support that we got then from the multilaterals and the bilaterals, we were able to do what we did. And then as the years go by, we started seeing improvement. We started seeing some budget lines coming from the states, and they were releasing things. We got some money to rent our first office funny place, and I mean, there are times that we don't even have money to pay prepaid electricity. We go for meeting, there's no power in the PIAC office because we couldn't buy electricity and all that. So it tells you the road that we've traveled, and that place where we're supposed to be meeting, where the air conditioners are off because sometimes when we go for meetings, we couldn't even get a place to park our vehicles because of the location of the place and all of that. But we still soldiered on. I mean, there were times that we were going when we were doing our first launch of the report in Takoradi. On our way to Takoradi, the weather was terrible. It had rained and the plane had to return. I mean, I will never forget that experience. That's my only time that I've sat in a plane that I didn't get to my destination. So they brought us back to Accra because we couldn't land anywhere in Takoradi. It was raining, and we came and slept over in Accra. We're actually going the day before the event.
Okay.
So it meant that the next morning we had to go with the very first flight, and by the grace of God, we managed to land safely. But it was those were experiences that I can tell my grandchildren how Ghana I nearly sacrificed my life for Ghana and all of that.
Those are quite interesting experiences.
Yes.
I mean, and for Isaac, you were a staff then, and the way Mr. Jikupini was narrating members' perspective, for a staff, how did it feel like to be working in such an environment?
Well, not as early as he's referring to, because when they started in 2011, I wasn't there. I joined in 2012, and for about 6 months, I wasn't paid. I think from June to December 2013, my salary was in arrears. I mean, because nothing in the office, even to buy stationery, paper, wasn't there. So you would have the unpleasant experience where even the laptop I used, when I was hired and I was reporting to work, it was my laptop I used, my personal laptop that I brought and used until we had, because we couldn't hire someone to work in the office. I think someone volunteered to come and help us in the office, and the person stole the laptop. So I lost the laptop. I mean, we can talk about these experiences early on, very, very difficult situations. And I think for about 3-4 years or so, you would not talk about a salary increase. I mean, the salary itself is not coming. So you won't talk about increasing it. How do you, even what is there, we are struggling to pay. So if you increase it, you decrease the chance that it will be paid. So, I mean, those very harsh, unfavorable conditions were what we worked in until I think somewhere 2014, where the committee hired the second staff, Philo, after her national service at Shraj, and gradually the secretariat. So I had to do everything, Jesse. I mean, so what is done now, we have 3 departments. This department does this and this. I mean, everything was everything. And whether you had the competence or not, you had to be a one-man thousand and do everything. And I remember that Major was almost a secretariat staff, because it was such that if he didn't come to help, reasonably you could not expect me alone to be able to do some things. So he was very actively involved as chair. And some of the other members, I remember Mrs. Piazza, then a member representing Christian groups, was the president of Institute of Chartered Accountants. They all brought their expertise to bear on the work of the committee. So, I mean, we can go on and on and on, Jesse.
Indeed, we can go on and on and on. But I believe that currently we are seeing a very different PIAC, for want of a better word. So what is accounting for the change that we are seeing now? I mean, we have an office now. There's a secretariat that is fully running. So at what point did that transition come in?
Okay, so in 2014, at the getting to the end of the year, Revenue Watch Institute, whose conference room the committee had the privilege to use until it hired a place, applied for some grant from the British government for PIAC, a 5-year grant of, I think, 1.2 million cedis. So that grant included building up the secretariat. And building the secretariat up meant hiring a few more staff to add to the 2 of us who were there. So I think 3 additional staff were hired, 2 in the technical department and then 1 to head the secretariat. So that strengthened the numerical strength, but also the technical competence of the secretariat. Capacity building programs were run to better position the secretariat to support the work of the committee. The capacity building programs included the members. So that more like lifted the secretariat from where it was. Then also a place was hired, another office space was hired, which is where we moved to around Kokomlemle. So that is where the committee now became resident, and its programs and activities more like were planned from there. That became its official premises until it moved to where it currently is.
Yeah, plush office.
So Shiguri says that it's a flash office, right? I mean, maybe it reflects the glory of God and what God has done for PIAC in 14 years.
Yeah.
But this is still time with PIAC, and we are looking back on our 14-year journey. And I mean, I'm just sitting back listening to them share their experiences. I'm sure if I was there by then, I would have run away. Because to work and not to be paid for like 4 or 5 months, I mean, that's serious. But today, I mean, they were determined, and then they worked hard. They kept the vision going. And today we are seeing a very nice PIAC that we are all proud to be a part of. So as we mark 14 years, we have looked back. We will gradually get into looking ahead of what lies ahead of PIAC going forward. But if you are watching us and you have any comments or questions, please you can drop them in the comments box, and then we would read them. And then if there are questions, we'll also respond to them as the conversation progresses. But before I come back to my in-studio guest, we'd like to take this quick video from Dennis, where he talks about the impact of PIAC. Mind you, Dennis was one of the early staff of PIAC who was in the technical department. So let's take a look at that video.
PIAC has existed for 15 years, and within these years, it has ensured that information about oil and gas revenues are available to citizens. It has consistently released reports since 2011 and has ensured that those reports are available to the public. We have not had that for other sectors of the economy. For instance, our gold revenues and production, we do not have current and up-to-date information, which is a gap that PIAC has filled for the petroleum sector and has ensured that information is always available to the public, and that information can be used by any citizen of the country to exact accountability, which is the core of PIAC's mandate.
So that's 14 years of PIAC. We are leaving a legacy of ensuring that there's transparent and accountable management and use of petroleum revenues in Ghana. So back to my in-studio guest. As we look ahead, what lessons has a committee learned that is going to shape its future going forward? So I'll start with you, Mr. Jikamine.
Okay, I think the committee probably they have their new strategy, so probably I could speak today. But let me sit from outside. You remember I used the word bullish. At the time we were quite expectant that we're going to make a difference. I think my biggest disappointment as far as PIAC is concerned is our inability to crack the whip when we know that the whip needs to be cracked. So going forward, I have two prayers. One is to is that God will have the industry going on for a few more years, not die because we are probably not going to. We will have depleted our reserves, so there wouldn't be any oil and gas industry. I think the right investment needs to be made so that PIAC will continue to be relevant, because if there's no revenues to be tracked, then there wouldn't be the need for a PIAC. So I pray and hope that we'll do the needful. We are told that new investments are coming in, so we are likely to not just have a few fields, but we'll have an industry that is producing. But I'm also hoping that the rest of the money that we're going to get, the lesson is that we at least will be able to do some big things with the money, so that what we've been calling legacy projects will be there for all to see. If our children don't come and meet an oil industry, there will be some development that we can attribute to oil. In that sense, what PIAC had been crying out for all along, that we need to focus and make sure that we don't dissipate and this word that we appear to have overflogged was thinly spread. Thinly spread. We like that power. It's something that we believe that is probably what this current administration tried to do by saying that all the oil money is going to go into the big push. But there's a fundamental problem that I hope that if there's ever the opportunity for this act to be changed again, that proviso in the act that says that our spending of the oil money should be informed by the long-term national development plan should still be the focus. We didn't want the oil money to be used to implement party manifestos. I believe that's the whole idea, intention behind the Framers Act. It shouldn't be short-termism. They shouldn't be driven by short-term promises. But it should be, we have a long-term national strategy so that everybody plugs into that. As it is now, we hear there's a big push. It's still very much a manifesto promise. It doesn't reflect whether or not, for example, if the big push is going to do the Accra-Kumasi Road, what shows that is the most important priority? I'm not saying it's not an important priority. So going forward, and I believe going forward, if there's anything that I hope and pray that PIAC gets, is to have more muscles to be able to ensure. You see, to ensure is a key. The word is to ensure. How can PIAC ensure? I believe that's where PIAC should be gravitating towards. 14 years, we are old enough. And one big disappointment I have is how our constituents group haven't helped PIAC. So, for example, if PIAC should publish a report and say that something untoward had happened, if PIAC can't go to court, what stops, let's say, the Chartered Institute of Accountants to say that we are a stakeholder in this committee, we are taking the matter to court, we are testing the law, we are challenging what maybe the executive is doing? What stops the Ghana Bar Association from acting on our behalf? Now we hear the Catholic bishop saying that Galamsey should stop now. We have religious groups, maybe that kind of pressure coming to bear, and somebody saying that we are taking the issue to court. For example, why should PIAC be starved of money because the act has been changed? It really doesn't, for me, I don't understand. It set us back how many years? 2015 was when the act was amended. So there's some small money, which is less than 1%, 0.00%. that earmark fund that should go to PIAC. Now we are still back to where we started off, where the Minister of Finance, depending on which side of the head or bed he slept, and depending on what the wife told him or her, would determine how much PIAC gets. I can't fathom that. It doesn't really make sense. That has to be corrected as soon as possible so that PIAC is able to do what they are supposed to do, and they wouldn't have to go back to the Lalasulada era where you go with cap in hand and begging. There is no justification for that scrapping. And even if we decide to say that we want to focus the money that PIAC gets is nowhere near anything. It can't do anything. And that provision in the Act will have to be reinstated so that PIAC, at least PIAC will have a dedicated money so that just as the common fund gets what it's supposed to get, PIAC gets its money and PIAC doesn't wait and go and consult anybody. It's given to the PIAC and PIAC is able to run with it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jukumini. Isaac, I'll come to you now. After 14 years, what should citizens expect from PIAC?
Well, now PIAC has weathered the initial challenges. Mr. Jukumini has mentioned some of the current challenges the committee is facing, but looking into the future, I think that the member institutions should be seen to be owning PIAC a bit more than they are doing. They should be more involved in the work of the committee. It should not be that you fought for PIAC, here you are with it, and then that's it. We have PIAC. And no one is ensuring that PIAC is doing its work. It's well placed to execute the mandate that the Act has given it. So I want to see more involvement from the member institutions that make PIAC. I want to see citizens get more interested.
More angry.
Okay, more angry at some of the utilization decisions. If you take, for instance, stabilization fund, the fund that we are supposed to fall on as a nation, instead of building the fund has been consistently capped at $100 million US, and it has remained so. So you can't imagine that this whole nation, all that we can fall on should revenues fail is $100 million US. And even that, the Act does not say withdraw everything. So there is still so much to be done in spite of so much that may have been achieved.
So, before I let you go, recently there's been an amendment that has affected your funding, and we've been seeing stories in the news. PIAC is cash-strapped and all of that. How's that playing out for you currently?
To say that it has derailed the committee is an understatement. PIAC is back to its pre-2015 situation. The regulations of the PRMA requires that at least PIAC should organize 2 public meetings a year on its mandate. As we speak now, PIAC has organized 1, and even that was funded through Good Governance Africa's funding, not the ABFA. We have been in arrears of staff salaries. We are struggling buying stationery, running the office on electricity and things like that. We don't want to go into the details, but
no, you have to go into the details. You sitting in the secretariat, probably you are diplomatic. Me, I'm not in the secretariat, and I can say what it is. You see, it really, I struggle to understand the rationale. Okay, and this is something that I believe citizens must be angry about. Okay. If you take the amount of money that was given to PIAC last year and even their own budget for this year, and you compare it to the projected oil revenue, it's so infinitesimal, it's so insignificant. It won't spoil anything if PIAC is given that money to do its work. How on earth is PIAC salaries in arrears in the year 2025? It's not right. And I believe that most people watching us and the people that PIAC will be working with and trying to get them to draw the government's attention to this, it's an error. This error must be corrected. PIAC's funding shouldn't be negotiable. It shouldn't be cut in any way. PIAC should be allowed to do not just what they were doing, but do more. PIAC should be able to visit more projects. It shouldn't be visiting fewer and fewer projects because of lack of funding. It's mind-boggling to understand the thinking that went into taking that funding from PIAC and taking PIAC back to the pre-2015 era. I believe that after 1 year, there should be an evaluation and that has to be corrected. And we shouldn't keep quiet. Citizens should talk about this. The constituent groups, the bodies that are sending representatives to PIAC should speak out. And we know, we've been made to believe that this is a listening government. So they should listen to what the citizens are saying, and at least PIAC's money should not be at the whims and caprices of one person who decides how much goes to. You people cannot talk about it, but I don't work for any government. I can say that is it.
So thank you for speaking up for us, Mr. Jekumine. But I'll let Isaac wrap up on what he was saying before.
All right. So I was just saying that the amendment has badly affected the committee's work. And the earlier something is done about it, the better. Fortunately, the committee got to meet the president, and he promised that instructions would go to the Minister for Finance for funds to be made available to PIAC for its work. That promise is yet to be fulfilled. The committee is still knocking the doors of the Minister for Finance to meet him and really articulate these issues to him. And the committee looks forward to that meeting happening. PIAC has always worked with collaboration, and we look forward to working with collaboration until it becomes necessary to use any other strategy. So, I mean, in a nutshell, that is what we would say. But PIAC has not folded its arms, sitting, not doing anything. We published the 2024 annual report, where work is almost done on the 2025 annual report. But it is really through very little funding,
So this has been Time with PIAC, and today we had a conversation on 40 years of PIAC, looking back, looking ahead. So thank you so much for joining us on this special Facebook Live session. So over the past 14 years, PIAC has worked tirelessly to keep citizens informed, hold duty bearers accountable, and ensure that Ghana's petroleum revenues are managed and utilized for the benefit of all. Today's discussion has been a moment of reflection on the progress made, the challenges encountered, and the way forward. But our work is not done. As we look to the future, PIAC remains committed to deepening transparency, strengthening accountability, and ensuring that the management and use of petroleum revenues contributes meaningfully to national development. Thank you for staying with us, and special thanks to my guest, Mr. Ishmael Ejekumhin. He's the Executive Director of KITE and a past PIAC member. I also had Isaac Drumna Esquire, the coordinator of PIAC. Thank you, gentlemen, for sharing your not so pleasant experiences at the inception of PIAC with us today. And thank you also for joining us. Remember, PIAC exists for you, the citizen. Together, we can keep building a culture of accountability in the management and use of petroleum revenue. Stay connected with us on all our social media platforms and via WhatsApp on 055-441-6544. 055-441-6544. Until next time, thank you for watching and have a wonderful afternoon. I'm Jessica Echampon. Good afternoon.